Hi, everyone. Welcome to another special edition of SDSF Live regarding the coronavirus pandemic. We have had 4 specialists on in this past month to discuss this pandemic. We've had 2 hematologists looking at things from different angles. We've had an endocrinologist and a pulmonologist. We have been busy. Tonight, we will be moving toward the psychological aspects of this pandemic with psychotherapist Mahmoud Huda. As you're logging on, please let us know where you're logging on from. It's been an interesting day in Houston. We had hail and tornado warnings. Had to work on this show today from a closet fort.
I like closet forts. Closet forts are actually some of our specialties in the Grinnell household.
I know they are.
My kids had a 24-hour fort challenge, and I'm not going to lie, it was phenomenal. Yeah, I like forts. I don't like that you had tornadoes. Michigan does not have tornadoes. Nathan's kind of a little bit sad about that because he really loves weather patterns and like weather. So he's always like, where's the tornado? Where's the tornado? And I'm like, we don't get tornadoes. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do.
I've actually never seen a tornado nor actually experienced a tornado, but there's like Hurricane Harvey. There was a lot in my area, but we didn't have any like specifically around my house, thankfully. But there's always a lot of warnings.
We do get we'll get like water spouts. I think it's so interesting. So you and our ring lights are making us have double eyes today. And I think it's sun shining out. I don't know. No, I think you should be able to see. I'm just pointing out that I like it.
I can kind of see without them.
What isolation does to you. You have to see things.
I'll take off my glasses today. Okay.
Yeah, I hope everyone's staying safe and sane. I hope your loved ones are also staying safe wherever they're located. The weather in Michigan has been a little bit weird. So we had hail like 3 days ago, and then it was like we were in shorts raking yesterday. So I don't really know. Tomorrow it'll probably be raining. And there's always this saying in Michigan that says, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes and it'll change. And they're not kidding. It's always something different. Spending a lot of time outside. It's been really nice, but we're very excited about tonight's show. Our guest isn't just a psychotherapist. He's also an SDS dad. So he understands the side of this like Nicole and I do. So it's going to be like having coffee with friends. He sees this from both sides of it. He really can understand the psychological side of it from having a background in it, but then also living every day in the trenches like we do. He likes to be called Max, so that's what we'll be calling him for the remainder of the show. He's extremely awesome. I know he's helped Nicole and I a lot this week through a lot of our struggles because it seems like, I don't know about you, Nicole, but the struggle bus hit me really hard this week.
So
like
hard.
Nowhere.
So hard. I think we've been in quarantine, like 5-6 weeks or something? Like over a month, right? So
I don't even know.
We don't even know.
Like you said, when Roman was talking to friends, they were like, what month is it?
I know, it's so true. I met Mac's family at SDS Day in Boston this past November, and they were lovely. It was so nice to meet them. How cute are they?
Look at that.
As a reminder, this show is brought to you by the Shakman-Diamond Syndrome Foundation, providing support for patients and their families around the world. The show is also public, so please do not post any private questions. These shows are uploaded to the SDSF website and YouTube. Subtitles are also added, and you can use the translation tool after it's uploaded to translate into your native language.
Yes, and speaking of native language, I like that already right off the bat. I see Texas, St. Louis, Ohio. I don't really like Ohio, but Midwest represent. Denmark. Like, I love that this is working, and I love that technology is able to let this happen. I think it's really, really cool. So if you see if any international families see the need for, like, if something's not working with the subtitles, please let us know. We won't know unless you tell us. We're going to think all the words are great, and they're probably not.
Also, if we have families that are, the time that we've been having these shows isn't working for you, please let us know about that. The 6 p.m. Sunday show seems to be working for a lot of families around the world, but we're happy to accommodate that. So just let us know for that too. Definitely.
Like she said, this show's for you guys. It's been for you guys from the start. It's, so we want to make it work for you guys. Tonight, let's keep the questions fairly general. Mac will not be able to answer super specific questions. as you could guess, we have a lot to get through tonight. But first, we wanted to share our giveaway because Nicole and I worked really hard on finding some fun things for you guys because we know we're all really. Also, I'm touching my face a lot. Don't worry, I'm in
I
a
always want to check my face during the
I'm
show.
always touching my face. Don't touch your face. But so we wanted to find some things for you guys because I mean, it's pretty cool, giving away little Ronas and little toilet papers. But Nicole found this candle, and I think it's just phenomenal. It's
so cute. I always want our giveaways, but I think we're exempt as hosts, right? Like,
I think we're banned. Yeah, we're not allowed to win.
Dang it!
Like we could rig it. But speaking of
rig
rigging,
it, maybe. To win our giveaway, you need to interact with the show in some way. Comment, share, give us a thumbs up, or start a watch party.
Yes, start a watch party. Those are really easy, and they bring a lot of people in. And if I've commented on a past post and said you were a winner and you didn't send me your email, or you did and I didn't reply to you, please send it to me again. We want to make sure you get your stuff. And Nicole and I aren't very good with organization, shockingly. Yeah. So, how long have you guys been in quarantine? For Nicole and I, we were saying it's about 5 weeks for us. 4 weeks.
I think we're at 6 or. Roman had his bone marrow biopsy the first week in March, and it was the next week after that. I remember we went on lockdown. And so
we got home from Wisconsin on like March 7th, and then we kind of went into loose lockdown that week. And then Justin was off the work the week after. So I don't even know.
I don't even know a month. I think it's like March, Pearl, Day, maybe, if those are all 1 month together. I feel
March, like someone shared a funny thing, and I think it was an SDS mom, so I don't want to call her out unless she wants me to call her out, but she said something like this year, the leap year in 2020 was really interesting because February had 29 days, March had like 5 years, and April, we don't even know when it's ending.
We don't even know anymore.
It's so interesting. Yes, Lindsay. So on the video, you should be able to, that you're watching, it should say share. And so if you hit share and then send it to friends, just tag people in it. I don't know if you guys can notice, Nicole and I are a little off the hinges tonight, and I think it's the perfect show for it. It's
great to have Mac on.
It's phenomenal. Speaking of, why don't we introduce him? This is Mac. He is the psychotherapist we're talking to tonight. SDS Dad.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hi.
We're good. We're hanging in.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us tonight. We may have to add a tissue alert for this show. Just talking to Mac. Actually, Orva, who runs our behind-the-scenes tech, Michelle and I all mutually said that how helpful Mac was just to us, just talking about what we wanted to talk about for this show with him. And we all got a little teary talking to him. So just want to add a tissue alert. We may need to cry a little during this show, and that's okay.
And Nicole's not just talking about you guys crying. Nicole's talking about us taking a break, leaving the room, crying, coming back with fresh makeup. So just don't. If we disappear, it's fine. Everything's fine.
Do we have a budget for hair and makeup, or are they not essential workers right now?
They are not essential workers, and I don't know if that's in the budget. I think we had to really swing for a handle here.
Maybe Peter, my husband, could be hair and makeup later. Maybe.
Oh, I wonder if Evelyn could do it for me. That'd be great.
Possibly. We're going to start this show by asking our viewers a question that we posted on our support page. What is causing you stress and anxiety during this time? We got a lot of answers, and we shared those with Mac. We're going to highlight 5 today, but we'll go over any that you guys bring up during the show. So we're gonna try to get through at least 5 today.
Yes, that would be a good thing. The first stress we're going to talk about is cumulative stress, which I think is something that I go through a lot without acknowledging that I do, maybe. Can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly cumulative stress would look like? I don't know if we can. There we go. Okay. There we go. Sorry, you were muted a little bit.
Was I? Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. All right. Thank you. Well, cumulative stress, Michelle and Nicole, is it's a common experience for a lot of people a lot of our families who have kids with medical diagnoses, but it's just stress that compounds itself when we're feeling overworked, a lot going on. Especially nowadays during the lockdown, there's just a lot of sensory information from our phones, social media. And then day after day, it just builds upon itself. And eventually we can have a reaction to that stress. And it's also, cumulative stress can hinder our ability to relax very well.
And that cumulative stress is so sneaky. It creeps up on you and you don't even realize it. We think we're superhuman as SDS parents, and we don't give ourselves enough grace.
That's a very good point, because a lot of times our survival mode kicks in, especially when we're dealing with trauma. A lot of my clients and patients that I deal with are traumatized, and we work a lot with dealing with the various symptoms of trauma. And all of us are experiencing a collective trauma with the pandemic of COVID-19, as well as that compounded stress, as we'll talk in a little bit later about having already a tough diagnosis to deal with in our families, and then this cumulative stress all around us with everybody else going through this as well.
And the level of stress just keeps coming at rapid paces in different levels, like financial, worried about our own health or a loved one's health, or family's health, financial stress, just stress from all levels. One of our viewers said, what stresses me out is friends and family not taking COVID as seriously as we are.
Yeah, and that's tough. I mean, I'm originally from New York City. I know Nicole is, and we just recently learned of a death and a relative of one of our family members up there, and so there's a very real phenomenon to it. If people just understood how the ERs are filling up, and it's not to sensationalize or cause fear, but there's a reality check, so that's understandable. But when we talk stress, these are very important points. You have to first understand, like Nicole said, it's insidious. It sneaks up on us. But there are early warning signs that we have to be aware of. There are mild signs. Then there are extended signs, and then very severe signs of how cumulative stress is affecting us. So mild signs, you have to gauge yourself. It could just be feeling on edge, or just stressed out, or not sleeping very well. Mild symptoms are having more profound memory problems. You get sick easier because you're constantly stressing. Extended signs could be relationship problems, with your significant other or your kids, or even using alcohol excessively or drugs. And then severe signs where you're having full-blown panic attacks, having dark thoughts, and it could get pretty bad. So it's just very important. Number one, we can't control other people's behavior, so we have to know, with your family member, we can only educate and share, but ultimately we control what we can control, and that's one of the coping mechanisms we'll talk about later.
Yeah. That leads us to the second anxiety of feeling very vulnerable at this time. So a lot of us feel very vulnerable because we already felt vulnerable and exposed as families with immune compromised children, and some of us our income level isn't what it was before, or SDS children, or if you're an SDS adult, maybe you're struggling as it is, and now we feel even more vulnerable as a population of parents or SDS patients.
Yeah, this stress hits me and our family hard. It's you get the lump in your throat, the sick feeling in your stomach. We already feel so vulnerable to so many things, and that when the virus started getting ground here in the US, it was I kept telling people, this rodeo, you can tell people how to be calm, but now 5 weeks in, and here I am, and I'm like, I don't know how to feel calm anymore. So I don't know how to help.
And vulnerability, we call it a lot in the psychotherapy field, what is called powerlessness or helplessness. And a lot of us, and Nicole and I were discussing this the other day, a lot of us are parents who are amazing. We're on top of things. We research, we advocate for our children. But then when a diagnosis comes, like SDS or some difficult diagnosis, you feel helpless and powerless in that moment. And then feeling such a shame or guilt or anxiety can start to resurface. Powerlessness is one of the worst feelings we can experience, next to shame and guilt. So it's just very important for us to recognize it first and and understand what is within the scope of our control. Sanitizing ourselves, wearing masks, being very vigilant, using protective equipment out there, versus what we can't control, such as the behavior of others, and what our officials do and things like that.
Right, Mac, and you and I were talking earlier this week about SDS doesn't take a break during a pandemic.
That's right. Yeah.
Especially with a syndrome like SDS, the symptoms can keep popping up, and you feel even more vulnerable and stressed and anxiety-ridden when you're, if you're a patient or a parent, when your child gets more diagnoses during this time, or you're dealing with a particularly harder diagnosis during this time, or there's families right now in transplant that are trying to manage that as well. It just feels so exposed and vulnerable.
And it's very interesting what Michelle alluded to earlier. She says she gets a lump in her throat. That's when we study trauma and we talk about cumulative stress. It's very important for us to, number one, gauge our bodies. Where do we feel the stress in our bodies? And to teach that to our children as well, right? And we're not talking about, the physical pain that's related to stress. A lot of people say they get chest pains, right, when they're anxious because of all the tightness of their bronchial tubes. But all that is, Nicole and Michelle and everyone listening, is what's called your autonomic nervous system. It's the part of your brain and nerves that you don't control. So when we get stressed, our body reacts before our thoughts can even follow. And the first thing we all need to recognize, myself included, is to recognize where stress hits us in our body. So if it's in our chest, obviously the deep breath, one way to start dealing with that. But there are other methodologies to use to de-stress the physical pains we feel from trauma and stress.
Yeah. The next one would be triggers. My Facebook memories today, ironically on a day where I'm getting all these weather alerts of tornado warning, hail coming. Hail's not particularly problematic, but a tornado could be problematic. But my Facebook memory reminded me how many times just in the last 10 years that it is seriously flooded in Houston, where we couldn't get to a hospital, we couldn't get to a pharmacy if we needed. The freeways just become rivers. And that was triggering for me. And a lot of people are having a lot of triggers in many ways, maybe a mask, maybe triggering, just feeling very helpless right now.
And triggers can happen in many different ways, and they're very important to recognize, number one, what they are and how it does affect us. Sometimes it could be smells, right? Certain things that we smell. Like you said, the visuals, Hurricane Harvey was horrible. It affected a lot of families out there. And so when we have natural disasters like tornadoes or even pandemics, our bodies can go through a myriad of emotions. But what happens is the rapid thinking that associated with anxiety. We start thinking a mile a minute. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What if this happens? What if? Well, we have to pause for a second and recognize how we talk to ourselves in our thinking, and recognize that sometimes when you're in an anxious state, that your thoughts are not always your friend. I know yesterday, Nicole and I were talking about this whole movement in psychology, everything positive. And of course, as a therapist for 15 years in private practice, we like to be positive. But there comes a point where we have to recognize that things are not okay. And it's okay to not be okay, and allow our body and our mind to just go through what it needs to go through, but then find the coping, find the strength to utilize all the tools we have, which we'll discuss in a little bit, to handle those triggers.
We're going to pause for some questions. Joan asked, how can we deal with people who don't take this virus very seriously?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, Joan. And one thing we have to recognize is the sphere of our control. We can educate, we can inform, the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, it's by far the most rapid killing disease in the United States within the last 3 months. When New York City, they were running out of morgue space and they were loading bodies into trucks, ice trucks. We we're saddened to see that. We don't want to become too sensationalistic. I think we need to educate and inform with a more level head. Um, Sometimes when it's too emotional, it could turn people off and actually push them the other way.
Right. It's really hard. I know a lot of people are feeling triggers right now. We have so many people from so many different areas. We have, Michelle named some of them: St. Louis, Ohio, Denmark, New York, Australia.
That's terrific.
It's really cool. I love that we are able to talk to people from so many different areas, and it's really, really cool.
I think it's cool now too, because with the COVID, with COVID, it's worldwide, and so to get,
Right.
Australia. I have a friend in Australia, and her view on COVID is so different because it looks so different over there right now. And she's like, I think we have 4 cases, and they came off a cruise ship. I'm like, you have 4 cases? I'm like, we have 138 cases just in our county, and she's from my county. She's like, really? I'm like, you have 4 cases on a continent. And so it's just really, but their lockdowns look very similar to ours. They're in isolation. They can only do certain things, and it like totally mind blows her that it's so different over here. And the next anxiety we want to highlight is limiting freedoms. Most of us live limited lives already, but we have to be really careful, and so we have to isolate a lot. This is another level of limiting. Some of us are reaching out to the families who've been through transplants for advice, because this is a lot like what they have to go through.
Yeah, many of kids with Shwachman-Diamond syndrome have very difficult conditions such as neutropenia. This has happened to my son, which has left him, as many of our kids, immunocompromised. And we've walked around from the days of the NICU with our son Gabriel, protective equipment, making sure we're not near sick people. So there is a lot of that limiting of our freedom. Last year, Gabriel was in a device on his leg because he has a lot of orthopedic issues. So he went through 3 surgeries last year to correct his leg. And, he was in this halo type of device, which is an external fixture. So we were we were homebound, and he was homebound for about 8-9 months in 2019. So then, after he got out, we started going out more and things, and then here the pandemic comes, and like we're locked down again. And aside from that, many of our families have had transfusions and very serious type of hospitalizations. Of course, we focus on the locus of our control. A lot of it is up here. We can do a lot of the coping mechanisms we have discussed, from entertaining ourselves to engaging in games. Referencing my son Gabriel, actually doing a lot of the schooling at home and things, it's well within his comfort level. So there's a sense of normalcy for him, and he's taking it a lot better, as Nicole pointed out, even better than our family and me and my wife.
I've seen a lot of other families post that their STS children are actually fairly okay. They're teaching the rest of us. This is how they, especially with the masks, wearing masks, they're used to that, or just being home more. We're the ones, the healthier ones are the ones that are really struggling. Even if our freedoms were limited because we didn't want to expose our kids, it's just another level. A lot of us are also feeling like, when does this end for us specifically? Like, a lot of people are talking about, I live in Texas, where we're supposedly starting to open up next week, but we probably won't feel safe until it's, really widespread safe, as a family. And I think a lot of people are feeling like that. Like, when is the community going to feel safe?
Right. Yeah. And the point I alluded to earlier is really how we think, and words that we use are very powerful. A lot of the therapy that's practiced out there, including in my office, has to do with working on what's called your inner dialogue. How do you talk to yourself? So if you say something to yourself, such as, I'm my freedom is limited versus, as Nicole just alluded, I'm keeping my family safe, right? That's a better way of looking at it while still recognizing the dangers and the risks out there. But tweaking words here and there in our thinking process can go a long way.
Michelle, are you still with us? Our last stress that we're going to highlight is how do you talk to our children about this? So many of the articles out there right now are saying to tell our kids you will be okay, you are safe. I guess that is based on the theory that most kids will be okay if they contract this virus. That feels wrong to tell our kids specifically because our kids are immune compromised and they keep saying that is a population that may be more affected. So how do we be honest with our kids without being too honest and scaring them and being appropriate?
Yeah. And that's a great question. Number one, we have to always take into account our child's age and developmental level. In other words, such a 5 or a 6-year-old's concepts of death and severe illness might be a lot different than a 9 or a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old. And then you have to always take into account your child's level of maturity. But to answer the question directly, Nicole, we do have to acknowledge the risks and the dangers out there and be honest with our children without over sensationalizing, without over instilling fear. So it's a balanced approach. And then we also talk about the measures that they can take agency or self-responsibility for doing on their own. For example, Gabriel doesn't leave without the mask. We have, lots of, the 3M masks, the protective equipment out there, and he knows to wear it when he's out there. And we've talked to him. You want to get to eye level. You don't want to scold or be snappy with your kids. You want to speak in a direct, frank manner with an even tone of voice, preferably a time where you're not overly stressed yourself. Kids, like most adults, we have in our brain what's known as mirror neurons. So if you're very upset and stressed and you're grief stricken, your kids will read that and they'll sense your emotions and your feelings without you even saying anything. They could just sense your energy. So you have to be very mindful of your own emotionality when you are speaking to your kids.
I've been joking that I almost need like some kind of chart on our wall that says like how many times you've narrowly missed the ER just in the last month of all the cuts and mosquito bites or just things that are happening around the house that could send my son to the ER. And I think a lot of us are saying we can't go to the ER, be more careful, and they're just being kids. We might be a little more relaxed with them. I mean, still worried, but we're very worried about them having to go to the hospital right now. We're going to pause again for some questions. Savannah asked, how do you help your child, SDS or sibling with the pandemic, as you feeling like your family goes from one crisis to another?
Oh, it's a very question. And hi, Savannah. It's nice to hear from you. And Savannah, you inspire me, and I see a lot of what you post and Lincoln struggles, and I pray for Lincoln that he continues to get better and stronger every day. Crisis management's not easy, Savannah. It sometimes though, when our backs are against the wall and we have no other option but to fight, it brings out the best in a lot of us. We didn't ask to be in these positions, but here we are. And life sometimes asks us, to rise to the crisis level. And you may not feel that strong that day, but still, whatever energy you have in that day, give it your all and try your best. You don't have to be perfect. Recognize the human part of you. So if you're not feeling great that day, you can go to your spouse, let him or her take the lead with the kids and give you an energy break, and then you can switch on and off. There have to be creative ways where you can't always be in crisis management mode either. So giving yourself breaks, allowing yourself to be human, Savannah, is a big thing. I know you're very spiritual. You pray, and for those out there who do, live like that, that's a very good methodology or meditation or some kind of connection to a higher power. Um, or even those who just meditate and just allow themselves not to be caught up always in the emotion, to give balance.
Another question came in, and I think it goes right along with it. They said, is it causing more harm to not let the kids leave the house at all? My kids have not left the house since the first week of March and are now very angry that only my husband and I are allowed to come and go when necessary.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I like to call it physical distancing over social distancing, but I know they call it social a lot. We can't always guarantee that other people will abide by social distancing. Uh, Florida has become well seen in the media here, so we've always had that problem here recently. And so, but if there are areas where you feel safe and there are, where there's nobody around, if it's feasible within limits, I'd let you guys take the call on that, of course. Um, and just understand that what you can control is your behavior, but not always what other people do around. I like going out and finding places to go, but there's a lot of places that are closed. And if there are areas you can go out even in your backyard, get some fresh air, walk around. I'm a big fan of exercising with your kids. I know someone earlier was talking about doing yoga with their kids and getting physical outlets. That usually is a better way of getting some of that energy out than going outside.
There's some really good resources out right now too. So we're a homeschooling family. So we've had multiple people come to us and asking for help and tips and resources. One of them is called Go Noodle. It's a website as well as an app on certain smart TVs, and they have all sorts of free kids health and exercise programs. They have meditating, they have kids yoga, they have running and workouts, and even they're silly songs. Like my son likes to sing one called Banana Banana Meatball. I don't really understand it, but it's great. And as for our family, a lot of Michigan is closed as well right now, but we are finding we do leave the house. My children, we don't go in stores together. We don't go in stores at all right now, but they definitely don't go in stores. So we'll find parks, and our governor had mentioned that we need to find a park that has less than half capacity full. So for our family, that means we find it with one car in it. And if there's more than one car, we don't go there. We'll walk, we keep social distancing. When we get home, we change clothes. We just do it very smart and safe, because if I keep the kids in the house for the rest of this, I think there'll be a riot.
I'm lucky. My kids are little. I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. So sidewalk chalk, bubbles, gardening, water tables are really interested. They're outside all day. We're taking them for walks and scooters and bicycles. We go find turtles. And do you have alligators there, Mac, or close to where you live?
Oh, plenty, yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot in our neighborhood. So we go find whatever wildlife we could. Actually, Michelle and I, we've been having more meetings with each other while I'm walking, and I'll call her to go over the shows, and we share each other's wildlife that we find on our walks or on our meetings that we're having. We're in 2 different areas, but she's like, look at this bird I just found.
And I've never once seen an alligator in Michigan. I would just like to point that out. That's where I live, where the wind hurts my face, because I have no alligators. I don't have massive snakes. I don't have big bugs. Like, we have birds, maybe a couple turtles here and there, never an alligator.
Mac and I have the same sort of wildlife. We're on the same longitude. We're going to switch gears now to coping strategies. Again, we posed this question to the support page. We got a lot of great answers from y'all, but we're going to highlight 5 again. The first one we're going to go over that we've kind of touched on a lot of these, but we're going to go over controlling what we can control.
Which is everything, right? I can control everything because I am the best at controlling all the things.
Mac, you mentioned locus of control earlier. That's something I think about all the time.
Well, no one wants to feel powerless. That is an awful feeling, as I alluded to earlier. And we we have a lot of power at our fingertips. We can keep in touch with our loved ones with the touch of a few buttons, and we could have access to the world of information on our mobile phones. But then there are things that we don't have power over, and that can leave us in a situation where we feel trapped, and that feeling is very unnerving. I've seen that a lot in therapy. But then what I've seen, the answers here, they speak for themselves, right? Focusing on the positive. A lot of families have bonded well together. If you work from home, you cut back on some of the travel time and you could spend more time with your family. Um, Reassessing hygiene, right? I mean, we remind our kids that cleaning our hands and washing our hands, these are all good things we could do, not touching our face a lot, not going out there and doing things that are unhygienic. Um, Staying home, getting groceries delivered if that's feasible to you. I think some of these apps, even some of the local restaurants, they've been very good about having delivery people just drop things off at your door. Um, a lot of communities have gotten together to help make masks and protective equipment. Um, that's a very positive thing, is watching communities through online and through distancing still come together. We use an app called Nextdoor, which is like a social media app that helps connect the neighborhood here, which is very good to know. So you can find strength in community and strength in doing things together as a family.
I'm helping organize a social distancing neighborhood flash mob. I'm choreographing it for our neighborhood.
That's awesome.
It's helping me emotionally to help it's one of the things we're working on as a community, to be apart but together. And so, yeah, I think
that sounds great.
Yeah.
And I'm currently sitting at a desk where I literally had to move my sewing machine and all of my mask making materials over because I am making masks for people in need. And so if on the SDS support page, there's a link to sign up if you need masks. I'm going a little slower, but I am doing it. And we'll have a link. We'll have all these links will be in the comments. So we'll link to the Nextdoor. We'll link to the Go Noodle. We'll link to whatever we think would help you guys at this time. You don't have to try. Usually we don't want you to try to have to remember things we're saying. So the next coping mechanism I wanted to talk about was how we need to remind ourselves that this is our rodeo. I say this all the time. This is fairly similar to what we're already doing. We know what we're doing. We know what to do. This is so much harder for everyone else to think about how many surfaces they touch, what their hands touch, how many times they move their glasses up, how to keep things clean. So can you maybe give us some helpful tips on how we can remind ourselves that we're already doing this?
Well, and I really love that, Michelle, because it reminds us that we've been in this crisis mode before, and we can draw on our strengths. In therapy, we call this the strength-based model. We got this. We can handle this. We know how to keep our kids safe. We know how to protect their faces, protect their hands, use sanitizer, make sure we're cleaning surfaces that are common areas, disinfecting. I remember when Gabriel in 2006 was in the NICU, we cleaned our fingernails when we went in, and the washing hands process went up to our elbows, and it was at least and we used our foot, with the water and did like the surgeons did. So the drill of cleaning for Carolyn, my wife, and I is very familiar, and I'm sure many of you out there can relate to that. So, you draw on your strengths that you've been there before, and recognize it as a strength is very important.
Yeah, and being mindful of who's sick around you or who has symptoms. That's so normal for us to already social think about 6 feet from people. We don't tend to go into crowds.
Right.
We're already kind of all doing those things. I've heard some families, particularly those with older patients, that the neutropenia isn't as severe anymore, and they've kind of backed out of those precautions. Say, do I have to go back to those? I think we all are, and so it's a little harder for them to say, okay, I'm going back to this, but they do know what to do. It's like riding a bike, right? And you kind of go back to what you already know.
Yeah, I feel like I should also say too, as a disclaimer, you know how in the beginning we say don't ask super specific questions, but I feel like maybe we needed a special disclaimer for this show. Whatever suggestions we are giving, please keep in mind I'm in Michigan, Mac is in Florida, Nicole is in Texas. Your state, your city, your local government may have different rules and regulations you have to follow. So I know there's some states where you can gather right now in more than 6 people or whatever, and then in Michigan, it's so locked down. We're not allowed to travel from county to county unless it's essential. So just keep that in mind as you're planning your coping things.
Yeah.
There's a disclaimer.
That's
I feel like it was necessary.
Yeah.
And things are changing all the time. So always be mindful with these coronavirus shows that we're having. Look at the date that we posted these, because it may change tomorrow or next week. So
yeah, I feel like looking back at some of the first ones we did, that information was out of date within like a week. And then there was new recommendations and new recommendations.
And a lot of these shows that we've been planning, we're literally planning them daily up to the minute like within the day, because things are changing so frequently. So we're working with these guests almost every day up to the day of the show, which is not normal for us, but we want to make sure that we're up to date for y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one we wanted to talk about was, and I think Nicole and I are both really, really bad about this, especially, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to throw either of us under the bus, but we're real bad. I feel more calm when I have information I can work with, but I get obsessed with knowing things all the time. So I'm constantly checking our community public health page to see how many cases we have. Not that it makes a difference in anything that I'm going to do, not a single thing, but I feel like I need to know. When you have little kids, so they sort of help me not to get sucked into the time of watching the news by looking at phones, but I think this is a really good coping strategy.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to be in the know, and we live in an era of up-to-date news. There's cable media, 24/7 blaring. There's social media, from Instagram to Snapchat, to Facebook. And it's important to be informed. Knowledge does give us a sense of power. It lets us, when we're in the know, we can make decisions. And hope is a very important thing. We need hope, right? We need to hope that things will be okay. We need to know this. And sometimes we feed into, I need a little piece of hope. So there's nothing wrong with having hope. But then we mentioned that cumulative stress earlier, and our brains can only handle so much. And when you're constantly feeding your brain with information and fear and emotions react to it, your whole nervous system starts to get a little out of whack, for lack of a better term. And it's important for us to center our energy sometimes. So limiting media exposure is very important. Your sources of media are important too. There are sources out there, and I won't get into the politics of that, but are very sensationalistic. They like to appeal to your emotions. And then there are sources out there that are more level-headed, use, research, data, phenomenon we can understand in scientific terms to make us make effective decisions for our families. But too much media is just not healthy, and too much of anything isn't healthy. I've been trying to tell myself not to eat as much, while I'm quarantined. So look at it as, it's okay to eat a little, but not too much. And the same is true with media consumption. You can consume a little bit, but not too much for the brain.
Yeah. Michelle and I are so bad about this. So bad. Our next coping strategy is family rituals.
Wait a second, I gotta clear something up. Are you saying I'm bad about eating, or I'm bad about watching the news?
I'm very bad about the media, because information, especially with SDS parents, we're used to researching. We're used to feeling like the more information we could use to help our kids, the better. And this is a hard one because it's also taxing our stress. And so, and we're home more, right? We're home more than we normally are, so it gives us more time to consume this media information.
And I'm also eating way too much ice cream. We have a local ice creamery dairy farm, I guess, and we went up to buy ice cream the other day, and it was like we came home with 4 half-gallon things. Like, our freezer's just full of ice cream at this point, and I feel like that's healthier than some choices we could make. So
Is that a family ritual?
That, we try to do on Fridays, we try to do movie and ice cream and root beer float nights, and our kids don't drink a lot of pop because they don't like it, which is fine. But every time we get pizza, we do pop with pizza. So that is one of our family rituals that we've kind of tried to stick to is pizza nights. And so we do ice cream and pizzas. My kids had s'mores for breakfast this morning. That's might be a new family ritual. I don't really know.
Well, and family rituals can be fun things like that. I like that pop and root beer float night, and you kind of have the movie going, and it's okay. And small little indulgences like ice cream and during these times, they're okay, all in moderation, right? Um, but my specialty is not dietitian, just to be my little disclaimer. It's our brain. What we consume is also what we put into our brains, what we hear, what we see, what we smell. So all of this is important. Rituals, there are families that pray together at night, for example, and that's a very good bonding ritual. There are families that play trivia or family game night or doing things together that allow for the sharing of ideas. Um, a lot of families, I have seen it, even in my own family, we're all on our respective gadgets, but that's okay to a point. But we also want to do things where there's interaction, eye contact, the sharing of feelings, demonstration of empathy and care towards one another. And rituals are very good with that. Some families have their own personal quirky rituals where they just do silly things together. Whatever it is that's relative to your family, but that it's done consistently and that it helps for bonding time is very important.
Yeah. I'm finding my son is 5, so we have done like a deconstructed pre-K with him where he's in a ton of activities. Not like I don't drop him off somewhere and then pick him up later. We just do a lot of activities. So finding a new schedule for him and new family rituals and a new schedule has been really tough for our family.
One of the things we utilize in our house, and we've done this forever for homeschool, is we have a visual schedule, a magnetic visual schedule, and that really helps a lot. It's definitely like derailed itself at this point. I don't know what day it is, so I don't know what magnet to put on there, but it is helpful when we do remember to do it.
We're going back to that here.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think we have one last coping strategy, I think, unless I missed it before, and we lightly touched on it about meditation or prayer or grounding, finding some form of it doesn't have to be religious, just some form of a higher power that helps you sort of feel calm. For my family, it's praying. So I don't know what it looks like for other families, but.
And that's awesome that you mentioned that, and it's okay to say that. And but like you say, whatever it is that you disconnect a little bit from the daily grind and the stress that's out there. A lot of times, I before the pandemic, my life was on the go, go, go. I have a private practice. There's a business that I'm responsible for, but I've realized that even being home and many of my clients, they've taken out some of that time. There's more time to slow down. And how do we sometimes just slow down, right? And allow our senses to take a break, right? So when you meditate, it's very important. How do you ground yourself? Grounding skills we use in trauma, because when there's so much stress going on, our brains can go a mile a minute. But grounding is teaching ourselves to breathe, allowing our muscles, because when you get stressed, your muscles tense up and you want muscles to relax. You want to connect with just the air coming in and out, or watching a beautiful scene. When I do a special therapy called EMDR, if some of you are familiar with it, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So we stimulate the brain to calm down when a trauma response happens. One technique we use is a calm, safe place. That's a mental image in your mind when you ground yourself that you can go to that's just beautiful. It could be a beach, a waterfall, some aspect of nature. It could be one of Michelle's brilliant paintings that she had right behind her.
That's
She
so
showed me a
amazing.
beautiful, there we go, a beautiful nature scene.
It's an SDSF requirement that I make her put a surprise painting back there.
It's awesome.
That's our inside joke. There you go.
And you're,
Very serene and
that's a
calming.
calm, safe place for me, Michelle and Nicole. And it's anywhere in your mind that just grounds you and it allows you to disengage from the fear, right? It's okay to have fear. We all have it. I have it. We all fear. And that can start doing extraordinarily bad things for our stress response. So grounding ourselves helps to manage that fear and anxiety response.
I'm muted. I'm mute. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm muted. I'm mute. That's the new one. I'm mute. Mute. There was just a couple people having a couple technical difficulties, so I was trying to hop on my phone and have them refresh their page. I know Orva, our technical wizard, is frozen behind the scenes right now. Nicole, I just wanted to point out, I don't know if anyone, something that calms me is I go on the internet, not looking for news, but I try to find those ridiculous Zoom meetings that people are having, like people will go to the bathroom on a meeting and they're just like setting it down and going to the bathroom, or their kids running in with a whale balloon, or whatever it may be. And I love watching those. And so Nicole and we kind of get down on ourselves, and so we were like, I don't know, we're having a lot of technical issues, but if you look around, everyone is, so it's not just us. And I feel the sense of camaraderie.
Yeah, when Michelle and I first started this show, we thought it was important, but we were like, we have no idea what we're doing. And now you see so many different, high tech major channels having to use these low tech methods to work from home, and we're like, we're not that much behind them right now. We have hard on ourselves.
That feels pretty good for two moms from two different time zones.
Exactly.
I'm sitting in my bedroom right now. It's great. Right. It's phenomenal. It's definitely good. I like watching those funny videos, or I like to watch funny cat videos. I like to watch things that have no sense to them whatsoever. Or like Nicole is saying, we have video chats at nature ponds. And so I'll be like, Nicole, look at this bird. And she's like, I'm on a walk. Look at these turtles. That's what we do.
There you go. Let's go to final questions. Jenny said, yesterday we all said our high-low from being at home during the pandemic. It was a great way to bond and discuss. What a great idea.
High-low.
That is a great idea. I like that a lot. And it's acknowledging the lows, but also recognizing the high. The first thing is always recognition of what's happening. Because Nicole, you said it brilliantly at the beginning. It's very subtle. Right? Even when we first learned of the diagnosis and you're seeing this specialist and this specialist, oh my gosh, but it could be this. And then you don't realize all of a sudden you can watch a show on TV and then break down crying. And I've seen that with my clients. And it's first, a lot of times we're on the go, trying to figure out the problem, trying to solve it when we don't realize what's happening to our nervous system and what's happening to our emotions. So it's very important to recognize the highs and the lows. I really like that idea. That's great.
Mac, one of the things we didn't really talk about, and I had talked to you about, is speaking of highs and lows, is that, and I'm sure I'm not the only parent, and other parents I've been talking to, that subtle drip. You go from being fine to snapping on your kids or snapping on your spouse. You had mentioned repairing was so critical right now.
Oh, yeah.
Or always, but especially right now.
Yeah, and I thank you for reminding me of that. And counseling, and this is more of like a family therapy. I work a lot with adoptions. It's not about the fight, right? It's so much how you repair that fight, right? So after the argument, after the blow up, it's okay. We're human. We have to, of course, be mindful of how stress reacts to us, but it happens to the best of us. We kind of snap out or say something that's a little off kilter because we're stressed. But how you approach your child afterwards is critical. Whether it is an apology, whether it is eye contact, smiles, look, I may have overreacted. But, and then and when we're calm, you explain what the rule violation was, but then also owning your aspect of it. That speaks volumes to your child. Also your significant other, right? I know my wife just chimed in. She says, "I really like the show." So I got to be very careful what I say here, right? Admitting that you are wrong is okay, and that
Yeah.
shows forgiveness. It shows strength, and it shows that you're willing to allow love to overcome ego. So repairing that reaction, you can go down and, hey, look, I realize, I may have overreacted, and I really care about you. And you emphasize the love aspect, but then after that, talk about the rule violation. So
Yeah.
I even joke around with I don't do marriage counseling as much anymore, but I say sometimes the best part of breaking up or arguing is the making up, as the song goes, and it's that repair effort afterwards that makes the relationship and bond, if anything, stronger and on a higher level.
It could be an interesting dynamic because you have SDS parents that are very stressed, and then SDS children sometimes have behavior issues, and then that storm of each other during this time could be a little. Plus, everyone's home all the time, and so it's a little. Everyone's out of their routines. It's my son is only 5, and he was like, "Mama, I think you need to take some deep breaths." I think so too.
That's
He's wise beyond his years already.
I think that's huge for our kids. I mean, we are in behavioral therapy, and so we have a lot of a good foundation at home for what to do during this because we've already had so many behavioral struggles. But one of our favorite ones is we call it a red light, green light choice. So if we're making a red light decision, we have to have a green light choice to come out of it. And I always I have to remind myself of it too, but you cannot de-escalate a child if you are escalated. It won't work. Like, you're just going to start yelling at each other. And then I think the repair is huge because I don't like fighting with my kids. I don't like yelling, but it shows them I'm human. Mom messed up. I made a mistake. Like Nicole said, it's a whole new set of rules right now. You've got spouses home. You've got Michigan is off of school for the rest of the year, which isn't new for us. We homeschool, but a lot of families are having to adjust to this new routine. And so I think we really have to give ourselves some grace. Take some deep breaths, red light, green light, and repair it.
And allow us to be human and recognize. I mean, like Nicole mentioned, there's families out there who have lost work. The word uncertainty, just think about that word right now. It resonates with you. It resonates with me. There's so much uncertainty. And that's where, as you alluded to, Michelle, grace is so important. Roman's recommendation, 5 deep breaths, is very important. Grounding yourself, all these coping skills. And we're going to take this step by step, day by day, and make informed decisions based on what we've done already before. And we've drawn our strengths. We've helped our children survive this far. We can still do it, and we can still continue on doing it.
There's a question that sort of correlates right with that. And so, Nicole, when we go back to questions, I'm jumping to the end and then we can go back up. But Jacqueline said, I thought the issue of PTSD was going to be discussed. And that's an interesting thought because PTSD looks so different for so many different people. In our house, I don't even call it post-traumatic. It's ongoing traumatic stress disorder. And something so simple can trigger something. And so what are some good coping ways to come down from that, if you know it's a trigger or if you don't know it's a trigger?
Yeah, and that's a good question from Jacqueline. And trauma is it could be a very big event. Like, I've had clients of mine who've been through like a horrific event, and it was just like, oh my gosh, and their brain just went on overload and they blacked out. But then there's, like, as you mentioned, Michelle, drawn out trauma, which are more smaller traumatic events over a long period of time. What happens is, with trauma, very specifically, is we block out the memory. That is very specific to PTSD, is we have memories that we repress and we try not to think about. But nonetheless, it resurfaces in other ways. So we have to recognize sometimes we do need to think about, we need to face what we tried not to think about. Obviously, I do recommend a professional if you feel like you're constantly losing control. Many therapists up there in Michigan, and I talk to therapists from all over, they do telehealth very much now. So I'm used to this format to talking to a lot of my clients. We closed our offices in early March. and just switch to a telehealth platform. So there's many competent professionals out there to help you face any repressed memories that are very specific to PTSD.
Another one of the questions that came in was, what do you think about tapping?
Yeah, can you hold on one second? I'm going to ask my friend Alexa. Alexa, turn on the master.
Oh.
What's the master?
That's the master.
Oh my
So yeah,
goodness.
thank you. Now I can see.
I'm going to close my blinds.
Okay.
That's where I had to go earlier. It was the sunlight was coming in and it was just like blinding me. I couldn't see anything.
And we're on the Eastern Coast, so it's dark now. So I apologize. Repeat that question again to me, because I had a.
You had a master thing. It's okay. What do you think about tapping? And what I'm thinking is, if I'm thinking it right, the therapeutic technique of like of tapping and grounding yourself. Unless Joan wants to reiterate, maybe, and I'm not understanding correctly.
Yeah, so there's a therapy out there called EFT, and then emotionally focused tapping. But then there's also the EMDR, which we do. Tapping is good because when we do the EMDR, we make the eyes move right and left. But sometimes clients don't like that. So tapping, I do it with the kids. It's called the butterfly hug, or even tapping your knees. What that does is stimulate the right and left hemispheres of your brain. And trauma is a whole brain event. A lot of people like hearing is in a specific part of our brain. Seeing is in the back of our brain, in the occipital lobe in the back. But trauma affects the entire brain and nervous system. So tapping can help stimulate those repressed memories, and then we can focus on coping mechanisms as those memories come up, so we can give our body a sense of healing, so we don't let the trauma response with our body tensing up and everything overwhelm us. So tapping it's very good. Yeah. And I would do it with a professional, though. I would strongly recommend that.
Yeah, and so here all along, I thought, so one thing we use to ground our son is when he's in a really, crazed, sort of angry state is he has to do, his alligator chomps, and then but it's not, anything like this. It's just to like feel yourself, you're here, you're okay. So that's interesting.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, as long as we're, the touching, even that, it stimulates a brain response. Just doing that, the nervous system stimulates. And a lot of times, because we're so used to blocking out memories or things that bother us, right? I mean, think about it. Sometimes we have to kind of put our emotions and stuff them deep down inside so we can function either at work or in a meeting or talking to a doctor. But then when we go, later on, it can come in what's called a flooding response. It just kind of all hits us all at once. So the tapping can help with that.
Yeah, I know we both really appreciate all of the tips you've given. There's a graphic that's going to be available in the comments later. It was not quite done in time before the show, so I apologize for that, but we wanted to get it just right and perfect, and we wanted to say the right things. So it's just some easy printout that you can hang up, and it's going to give you some coping strategies you can use, coping strategies you can use with your kids, and then some positive affirmations on it to remind yourself. So either hang them up on a mirror or something. We just want to help you guys get through this the best that you can, because it's an uncertain time for sure.
We want to thank our special guest tonight, Mac. This has been such a joy. I feel like we could have 15 shows spin-off.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you both. It's really a pleasure to be on this and to connect with our SDS families.
Orva and I were discussing in the host chat right next door to the public chat that we should have mornings with Mac, because I would just love to wake up and have you say, Michelle, it's going to be okay today.
I need that. Can I have that personally?
I'd be glad to ever come on again if you needed me, and it would be an honor.
Thank you so much. We also want to thank our SDS mom, Orva, who runs the behind-the-scenes tech to make sure this show runs smoothly. She does a ton of work for us, and we're so thankful for her. Thank you, Max, so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night, and good luck to everybody.
Love your family, Mac.
Bye, Mac.
We want to remind everyone of our fun giveaway tonight. This candle that I'm probably going to go order on Amazon right now.
I might do it too, because then we can burn it, because we have a very special guest next Sunday or the Sunday after.
No, it's next Sunday, yeah.
Next Sunday. So back-to-back Sundays here. It's going to be Miss Nancy Sincata herself from Camp Sunshine, their psychosocial director. So if you think this giveaway is good, we saved quite possibly on par for awesomeness, one for next week too. And so Nicole and I will be burning our candles.
Yeah, we thank everyone for joining us. We had a lot of participation tonight, and a lot of people from all over the world. So join us next week, 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, let us know if this time isn't working for you, but it seems to be. We have a lot of people all over the world participating. So everyone be well, be safe.
Wash your hands. Go take some deep breaths. Go hug your kids. Go play a board game. Bye, guys. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.